Now I want to share with you some of my favorite tips and tricks for effective facilitation. Now the first one is always use a presentation remote when you're presenting with the slide deck. Now what this allows me to do is to move around the entire room and present from the back of the room, one side of the room, the other side of the room, from the middle of the room, but not always be, chained to the front of the room where the computer is, because I have to advance the slides. This gives me the flexibility to move throughout the room. And that's extremely important if you want to get everyone engaged. I've noticed in my years of facilitating that sometimes the people who plan to be less engaged tend to sit toward the back of the room. I think they won't get as much notice. Present company here accepted, of course, but that can happen with participants. So I want to get to the back of the room. I present a lot from the back of the room. There's no law that says that you have to be next to the room, next to the projector, and with your hands on the computer all the time. And as I say, the presentation remote frees you up from doing that. Now, of course, you can advance a slide, take the slide back, reverse it. But then one of my favorite functions is the one at the top here, this little button that allows me to dim the screen when I'm not specifically referring to what is on the PowerPoint slide or on the big screen. Okay? And what that does is it allows the participants to focus on me and not have to split their attention between what I'm saying and what is on the big screen. So I encourage you to practice with your remote. And if you're not currently using that dimmer function, go ahead and do that. And if you happen not to have a remote, you can also press the B key while you're in the presentation mode in PowerPoint. It'll do the same thing. It will turn the screen dark. And again, that allows me to become the main point of focus and not have participants divert their attention to the slide, which I'm not referring to at the particular moment. Okay? Second thing is class setup. You want to make sure that you get to class, ideally like 30 minutes beforehand. You get everything set up, you test your videos, you make sure that the presentation remote is working, that the PowerPoint is advancing correctly, that you got the right PowerPoint there. Say if you have videos to play, you want to make sure that you test those to make sure that they're working beforehand. Any music that you're playing, same thing, to test that as well. Because what I want is by 15 minutes, the 15-minute point before the start of the class, I want to have everything set up so that as participants are coming into the room, that I can greet them, maybe conduct some small talk with them, get to know them a little bit, where they're from, get to know some of the names to begin with. And what that does is it helps break down some of the barriers that always exist when you have an instructor and you're the instructor and you're facilitating or leading a class for a new group of people. There's always a little bit of tension there and a barrier between. But if you make yourself accessible, you make your participants feel welcome, then it's going to help break down that barrier. And also, if I may plant questions or talk to a participant about a particular topic that we're speaking on and ask them if they have any experience on that, and if they would mind during the discussion of that topic, if they would mind sharing their experience. And that helps break the ice as well and create a more participative environment in the classroom. In addition, I always have name tags. I always want participants to write their first name with using a big marker so that I can call on participants by name. And as we talked about in the section on directed questions, if I don't know the participant's name, I'm going to be much more hesitant about calling on them with directed questions. However, if I can see everyone's name, then that gives me the opportunity to call them by name. One of my favorite quotes comes from Dale Carnegie, the famous creator of, the writer of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He initiated the Dale Carnegie course on effective speaking and human relations, which I'm a former instructor of. But one of the quotes that he had in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is a person's name is to that person the sweetest, most important sound in any language. So as we go about the job of creating rapport with our students, the more we call them by name, the more they're going to warm up to us and the more special that they're going to feel. So again, I encourage you always to have name tents and markers available so that your participants can write their names nice and big using a marker. Now, another strategy that I recommend is making sure that you have a fun activity prior to the first break, just prior to the first break. So typically, class starts at 10, and maybe you go until, maybe you go until 11:30 before you take a break, or 11 o'clock, whatever the schedule calls for. But I recommend planning a fun activity right before the break. And the reason for that is what's likely to happen is that participants come into the class with a little bit of skepticism, like, is this going to be a good class? Is it going to be a waste of my time? What's going on? And probably a little judgmental about the you and the class. So by planning a fun activity right before the break, okay, then the participants go to the break, and what do? They'll ask one another, so what do you think of the class? Well, if I've just been lecturing for 90 minutes and there haven't been any activities and the participants haven't had any fun or have not had an opportunity to laugh, or the back and forth, the banter about the class itself is less likely to be positive. However, if we've had some fun, I've made people feel special by calling them by name. We have a fun activity right before the break. Well, then when they go to the break and they discuss the class, as they typically do, then it's much more likely that they're going to have a positive viewpoint and be more upbeat when they return back to the class, because they're hearing positive things from other participants about the class. Now, oftentimes, you may be in a room that has a lectern, and you see the question on the slide: to lectern or not to lectern. And what I would say is 95+% of the time, you don't want to be associated with a lectern. You want to be out and about. You don't want any additional barriers between you and your participants. Now, the caveat to that, or the exception, would be if there's a situation when maybe you're presenting to a group, maybe very senior in an organization. Okay, the lectern is a position of power. So if you want to enhance your power, okay, then you can stand behind the lectern, or even if you stand beside a lectern and just put your hand on it. Okay, that's a position of power. And I would recommend the same thing if you have to deliver bad news to a group. You want to enhance your credibility. You want to enhance your authority. And you can do that by associating yourself with the lectern. Again, either standing behind it or even beside it, just putting your hand on the lectern. Okay? That enhances your credibility and authority, if you will. Now, I've experimented with this extensively. I've done courses where I do the morning session with a lectern, and then the afternoon session out in front of the audience and just strolling around, and then reversing it and doing the lectern in the morning and the strolling in the afternoon. And 100% of the time, in a typical class, not one where I'm delivering bad news, but in a typical class, the course evaluations are more positive when I'm out and circulating among the audience, presenting from different parts of the room with the, empowered by my presentation remote. I can get out and facilitate from different parts of the room. And again, 100% of the time, the participant feedback has been better. I've gotten higher evaluations with when I'm out and circulating and not behind the lectern. But that's based on my experience. So those are a few tips and tricks that you can use in order to make your classes more effective and relate better to your participants.